Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. If ever you're wondering why everything in Scotland seems to fail, despite them claiming that they've studied it and they've looked at examples and they've really done their homework, then this story really is going to sum up why. Because it appears that even when they do study things and they do see the pitfalls and people do give them expert advice as to why they shouldn't do something, because it's an unmitigated failure every time it's been tried, they still go ahead and do it because they're so arrogant that they think that failure won't affect them, even though it affects everyone else, especially people who are far more experienced and cleverer than they are, which in the case of Patrick Harvey is just about anyone, apart from Shona Robinson perhaps. So he's gone and done this thing, this rent freeze, despite studying it from all over the world, and all over the world it's been an unmitigated disaster, and bang, he says, let's do it. Let's have a look at why Patrick Harvey should never be anywhere near any kind of authority, because he is so dangerous. Here goes. So SNP analysed rent freeze failures all across the world, and they still went ahead with Patrick Harvey's controversial and frankly moronic idea for a policy. The Scottish Greens Minister introduced emergency legislation in 2022, but critics claim it's led to a housing shortage in cities like Glasgow and Edinburgh and soaring rents for new tenants. And of course, it was always going to. Anything proposed by this stupid little Marxist prick is always going to fail, because even though he himself has no education, no experience, no knowledge, in his arrogant, narcissistic mind, he thinks he knows everything. But it's quite clear he knows nothing. And the problem is, he was made a minister. A man who should never be anywhere near power was made a minister for housing, and for him it was like his apotheosis. He became godlike and drunk on this power and started pushing these things on people, thinking that he knew best. Everyone, experts across every sector, said this is an incredibly bad idea, and they told him. But that arrogant little prick went ahead and did it anyway. Lives have been ruined, properties destroyed. There's people who have just basically pulled out of the rental market. The rental market has crashed in Scotland. Those properties still left. The rents have gone up by the laws of supply and demand. Now people are saying all the rents are high because there isn't enough rental properties. And everyone's saying, why? Well, let me explain, ladies and gentlemen, why. It's because hat-trick Pervy thinks he's cleverer than everyone else. A man who couldn't even do his university degree. He left that. He's never had a proper job. He's as educated as a tin of Campbell's soup. He is no use, but found himself in a position of power and decided to exercise it. And it's typical of someone who was undoubtedly bullied at school, that when given that tiny bit of power, he wants to use it in a way that makes him look big and powerful. He is the big swinging dick of Holyrood, and look at the chaos, destruction and misery this inadequate little shart has caused. Everybody told him don't, and yet he went ahead. The Scottish Government have been blasted after it was revealed it undertook detailed analysis of rent freezes failing across the world and still went ahead with this controversial policy. Rents in Scotland have skyrocketed since Pervy confirmed the temporary measures in September 2022. And we knew that they would. Everyone said this would happen. The legislation which blocks landlords from increasing rents for current tenants by more than 3% has been blamed for housing emergencies being declared in the country's two most populous cities, Glasgow and Edinburgh. The thing is, you can then, if you're not allowed to increase these rents or whatever, all of a sudden, the income from that property isn't the 5% income that you should get from any investment. And so it's a much smaller investment. So the value of the property is, we'll make the numbers easy. Let's say it's a £200,000 property. To get 5%, you must make £10,000 a year. If you're not making £10,000 a year, then you're losing money. So what do? Well, you sell the property, you take the £200,000, you throw it in the stock market and probably make 6 or 7%. It's what you do. You need that ROI, that return on investment. But Marxists like Harvey do not understand how money works. Because for them, everyone's got to be poor, impoverished. There can be no ownership of property. There can be no ownership of anything. Everything must belong to the state. And that's why he wants it. He hates the idea of people being happy. He's a joyless little man. He wakes up every morning, looks in the mirror, sees Patrick Harvey looking back at him, and sinks lower into his state of fitful black dog depression. And to be honest, wouldn't you though? Analysis by CityLets revealed that the average rents in Scotland for new tenancies in the private sector rose by double digits for the 5th time in a row since the introduction of the law. There was a double-digit year-on-year growth of 12.9% because landlords will do that. They've got to get that return on their investment. That's what everybody does. You don't put money into a bank unless you're getting a return. You go to a bookmaker and place a bet on the expectation of a return. That's how it is. Now the Scottish Daily Express can reveal that the Scottish Government undertook its own analysis on how a rent freeze has worked in other countries, including Germany and the Republic of Ireland. Quick one, I happen to know the Republic of Ireland because obviously being in the building trade, and we had over 100 rental properties and some of them were in Ireland. And we knew when they brought it in the first time it was going to be an unmitigated disaster, and it was. It was brought in. It lasted, I think, top of my head, about 8 months, and then they abandoned it because the whole property market collapsed in Ireland. Then they went about 4 or 5 years, and then another new government came in, said, well, it failed last time, but it won't fail this time. It lasted a year, and then it failed, and they got rid of it a second time. It was truly awful. And, of course, it's going to fail because humans don't do rent freeze, because costs go up. So if you're renting out a property, fine, but you've got to insure it. Well, the cost of the insurance goes up. That's got to be covered. Maintenance costs go up. That's got to be covered. These people live in cloud cuckoo land. Costs go up. That's got to be covered. Anyway, the reports from this study showed that it had mainly failed, which I say, despite this, they still went ahead with implementing what is generally seen as a failing policy. Because why not? If they can create misery and destroy the rental property market, which is ultimately what their goal was, the better. Meanwhile, homelessness and poverty and misery, well, for them, that is a price worth paying, so long as it's not them that's homeless. In a document about Dublin, officials warned that when a property moved from an existing tenancy to a new one, those moving in became susceptible to rent increases. And it added, regrettably, this has had a negative impact on the price of renting property. This is the thing. Renting property, if you allow it to go up organically, slowly, over time, nobody really notices. You know, it's £1 a day here, 50p a day there, it all up slowly every year. When you hold it for a couple of years and then it jumps. And all of a sudden, finding that little bit extra each year becomes finding a lot extra each year, and that's hard. That's very, very hard. Prices always rise, but you want a long, slow slope. You don't want big jumps. Meanwhile, in Germany, the rules were canned after a legal challenge found that the rent freeze was illegal. But the report finds that prior to the inception of the federal Mietpreisbremse, which is German for rent control, rents across Germany had been rising at a steady rate of about 1 to 2% each year. Upon its introduction, prices increased by 10%. So instead of a low, slow growth, it was jumping high because that's what happens. That is how the market works. Anyone who works in the market will tell you. Everybody knows. It adds, prior to being made null, Berlin's rent law appeared to have mixed success. Indeed, while rents were deemed to fall substantially in the capital by around 7.8%, the supply of new flats entering the market dropped dramatically by 30% in the short time the law was active, because they wouldn't put the flats up knowing they're not going to get the return. Rather than buying a flat and renting it out, you stick it in the stock market and earn more money. That's what investment is all about. Income. So why invest in a house and earn nothing when you can invest in the stock market and earn lots? These people never learn. They're Marxists. This was criticised by the Scottish Tories, who pointed out that the rent freeze had been so much of a failure so far. Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Social Security, Housing and Equalities Miles Briggs, MSP, told the Scottish Daily Express, "This shows the SNP government weren't just warned by others that their rent freeze wasn't work, they actually conducted their own research, which pointed out the dangers, and then went ahead anyway. And it's resulted in a string of double-digit rent hikes and increasingly the shortage of housing, as everyone predicted. And as a result, Glasgow, Edinburgh and Argyll and Bute have now declared housing emergencies. No one is at all surprised. And why? Because you give the little pixie of doom control, and he screws it up because he is such a backward, retarded non-entity who thinks he knows it all. He knows nothing. Coming up. And that, dear viewer, is why everything in Scotland slowly turns to shit because of the Green SNP government. I'm afraid at the end of their golden rainbow is a very strange leprechaun, and he's sitting there with a crock of shit. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this has been an entertaining video. I was certainly entertained by it, I feel. Anyway, till next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.